Hey, before we start the show, we had a little quick announcement. My mom, Julie Richards, is starting her own private practice.
Yay!
Yay! We just wanted to let our listeners know all across Columbus that Mom is starting her own private practice. You can check that out at jhrcounseling.com.
And I'm excited because November is a new month and a new season. It's a good time to think about how you're healing and growing and the things that have great meaning for you. I love working with developmental and relational trauma. I have some specialties in EMDR, in trust-based relational intervention, which is TBRI, and Pia Melody's model of developmental and relational trauma. So I'm excited to get started in this new business.
And adoption stuff.
Oh, yeah,
and there's all sorts of things. Yeah, if you actually go to our website, you can see a whole list of things that she covers. So feel free to reach out at jhrcounseling.com.
Like, well, teaching is like a lecture, you know? And I was like, okay, well, I'm trying to help you. But I was giving her I taught her about Pia Melody and the ego states.
Oh, cool.
I did. Hi, welcome to Community Roots, a place where we gather in community to talk about mental health so we can travel the journey of life together. I'm Julie Richards.
And I'm Samuel Richards.
And we're off the beaten path today with Montana Schopieray. Welcome, Montana.
Hi.
Glad to have you today.
Glad to be here.
So we're excited to just be able to hear the things that have been an impact in your life and how mental health has been important to you. So we just invite you to share part of your story today.
Yeah. So I guess just to start out, for anyone listening, this might be like a trigger warning. We are talking about thoughts of suicide and touching on suicide. So for anyone listening, that's just a trigger warning.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah. Kind of the reason I'm here today is because when I was younger, when I was 8 years old, my mom completed suicide. And growing up, it was kind of talked about in our house. My dad welcomed questions growing up, and he never really shied away from the topic. And I think that's probably helped me be so open talking about it. Yeah.
So what were your family relationships like growing up, like up until the point of 8? Can you kind of describe a little bit of what home life was like for you, siblings, parents?
Yeah.
Like to help us kind of enter in a little bit.
Yeah. So I am the oldest. I have a younger brother. His name is Sean. He's 2 years younger than me. And my parents were married. But looking back now, how I was raised, I can kind of see there were incidences where maybe weren't good things that happened that my mom handled. I think my mom just really wasn't able to parent sometimes.
So who did you feel closest to growing up?
Definitely my dad. Yeah. I was definitely a daddy's girl. And my brother was definitely a mama's boy.
Okay.
So, and my mom, I don't think was ready to be a mom. My dad has told me that when she was pregnant with me, she wasn't really like happy about it. Even though they had planned for the pregnancy, like she wasn't happy to be pregnant, and like it wasn't until a few months before she gave birth where she was like finally accepted, and she's like, okay, I'm going to be a mom type of thing. So I don't really know if she was ready to be a parent or if she really even had the ability to be one in the fullest capacity, I guess.
We've talked a little bit about postpartum depression on the show and stuff like that, and just research I've done in my own life, I know that pregnancy really kind of, all the hormones coming out and stuff, it's really difficult to deal with, and it's a lot to deal with. I wanted to ask you how your dad created those places of safety that you felt really connected to him and stuff growing up, especially with losing your mom.
I think my dad always had a policy of being honest. He always wanted us to ask questions, no matter how hard they were, and he always let us know he'll answer them honestly. So if we had a question, especially about my mom's past, her upbringing was pretty rough and very abusive. So with that, my dad was still always willing to answer questions, and, you know, sometimes the truth is ugly, and my dad wouldn't shy away from it. He was always willing to talk about it. So I think just even letting his kids know that we could talk about it was like really crucial to growing up. Yeah.
I think it's a stigma in our day-to-day. Whenever you say, hey, how are you doing? Everybody's just like, good, I'm doing great. Oh man, everything's been so great.
Yeah.
And there's a tendency to be over happy. So it's good to have those areas that you can talk.
Or even people that are afraid to be honest with not being positive. They are afraid of complaining or being negative or something instead of being honest. I appreciate and value that authenticity and the vulnerability of being able to say, things are hard. Life is hard.
Yeah. It's definitely all of us, my whole family now, I think just because of that, with such a big moment in our lives, you know, we kind of wear our emotions on our sleeves. Like, we're very open, like very willing to say, I'm not doing okay. Like, I need a moment or something like that. So, yeah.
What kind of support did you have around you you were close to your dad, and you were saying that your brother was really close to your mom. Like, how did you as a family rally and get through that hardship?
Definitely right after her death, because we didn't know it was a suicide. So we had to wait for the autopsy report to come back weeks later. So once it came back and my dad, you know, had to explain what even suicide was, we didn't know what the word was. An 8-year-old and a 6-year-old
So young.
typically don't know that word. And the first months were pretty rough. I know there was like one time my dad was drinking a lot. And I remember my brother asked like what was for dinner. My dad was always staying in his room drinking, and like we would always just like be in our living room. And my brother asked for dinner, what was for dinner that night. And I like just made him a PB&J, like put him in front of the TV and went up to my dad. And I'm a very like confrontational person when I'm angry, like even when I was a kid. So I remember just looking at my dad and yelling at him and saying, "You're a drunk," like at 8 years old, and like calling him out on it. And he sent me to my room. And I remember like my room could look into his room, and I just like stared him down. And he got mad. But even to this day, he says that was the moment when he realized like, okay, I still have a responsibility to these kids. Like,
wow.
He said that moment kind of woke him up to realize like.
That's what I was thinking. It was just a wake up call for him.
Yeah, it was. And there was like a marked difference between like before that moment and after that moment. How he kind of like took care of us and was like, it's like he woke up and like kind of got back on his feet. So
that was a tremendous amount of courage on your part to be able to just call him out and to say, hey, we are kids and we need our dad right now.
That's crazy for 8 years old, for sure.
Yeah, I did things like that as a kid. So.
Yeah, sometimes people are afraid to have any kind of confrontation. You know, it's scary to face things. And in that moment, you just, in your young, youthful vitality, you were just like, hey, Dad, I need you to show up. Yeah,
that's great, too. I also empathize with your dad, because to both be in that position and lose your partner that you've had for at least 8 years.
Yeah.
And I had a friend who lost her mom in a car accident, and I know it shook the whole family, but I know it really shook her dad. And I can only imagine being in that position, and then also having 2 kids. That's gonna be big. That's a huge rally right there.
Yeah. And I mean, especially on my dad's part, he didn't just lose his best friend. He lost his partner, his lover, his, co-parent. He lost a lot of stuff. So I think the fact that he was like ready to get back up so quick after that incident was, admirable on his part. Yeah.
It brings me back to our episode on resilience, really. It's really cool. We talked about in our resilience episode about it doesn't matter how much trauma you faced or how deep the trauma, the amount of supports around you can get you through that. Mm-hmm. And it's really cool to see kind of a real life application of that.
And the idea that we can get through anything of trauma if we don't have to walk alone. Mm-hmm. So did you find that there were support people in place that would come alongside your family? Or how did you go about finding that? I know it's hard to even remember, I'm sure, going back that far, but...
Definitely right after, right after someone passes away, community, goes to the funeral, brings food and everything. And then as the months go by, some people kind of like drop to the side. They expect life is, continuing for everyone. But obviously behind closed doors, it's a little like harder to move on. And so at the start, there were a lot of the community was really great that we were living in. And then we actually had to move. My dad was working at Walmart at the time, so he couldn't afford on that income 3 people. So we moved. We lived in Michigan at the time, and we moved to Ohio. So we were uprooted from that community, had to find a new community and everything. And so that was pretty hard. And the following years after that were really tough. But I mean,
a lot of transition, a lot of change.
Yeah. My dad started dating again, so that's this whole thing. So yeah.
It's cool. I kind of also think too, our experience within our own family, kind of how, and I'm looking at my mom, this is not a visual medium, just because with job loss and different things that our family faced, that trauma kind of bound us together to where now post-trauma, well, mostly post-trauma, at least from my perspective, we're a lot closer and bound together, and we've moved around a couple times, and it kind of strengthened our family bonds.
Yeah, it definitely brings the family closer together, through thick and thin.
It's hard whenever it's so much change, so much transition, but also so much emotion that you would have to go through in your grief. And I can only imagine just the conflicting feelings that you would have about losing your mom.
Yeah. And growing up, especially as a teenager, I had 2 men in the house, so I was the only woman. And my dad, God bless him, he's a very simple man. So he's a boomer. He, is doesn't really know the ways of being a woman or what it means to do that. So I really had to learn things on my own on what it meant to be a woman, growing up, and just really small things, learning about your body and everything. So I kind of had to do
those
that
are really
on my
big
own.
things. I don't think those are small things. That's a lot.
Yeah.
You really had to grow up at such a young age. I mean, even to be 8 years old, making your brother dinner and telling your dad, we need you.
Yeah.
That was a lot of growing up you did really fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, my life has had a ton of strong women in it, so I imagine that you're definitely up there for your dad, just being able to kick him in the pants.
Yeah.
And get that done.
Yeah. We're a family of we call each other out. We're very honest, so yeah.
So today, looking back, have you gone back and addressed that? Have you kind of done some work in recent years?
Yeah. Growing up, I was very angry. I couldn't even sit down and talk about it like this. And so, when you're looking at survivors of suicide, and I would always, Google survivors and am I feeling the right way? Because I was always so angry about it, and angry towards my mom. And, I just felt like her death and her taking her, having her part in that, made my family go through all this. So I blamed her for a lot of stuff. And kind of as I grew up, and especially after I left the house, went to college and like was living on my own. Didn't really have those milestones, of growing up that I would need my mom there for. I kind of started to address the anger and became a little more understanding of it. I joined like a suicide prevention organization on OSU's campus. And, I tried to understand it really from a personal perspective. And then, I would go out and like talk about it to others. But yeah, the anger, I think, will always be there, but it's significantly less than it was, for sure.
So it sounds like through having more emotional understanding for maybe what she was experiencing, that gave you a path to compassion.
Yeah.
And gave some meaning to her story as well as your healing.
Yeah. And I think it helped my family as well. I think the less angry I became, the more my dad was, my dad was always willing to talk about it. But because I was approaching it with a much more like open mind than I had been, I think he was, happier to talk about it than he had been whenever I would bring it up. So, yeah.
I always think it's amazing that if we are more, we've talked about being curious and compassionate, like being open and receptive to something really gives us a way of building a bridge of understanding, of compassion, and being able to say, I wonder what that was like for your mom, for your family.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pain.
Yeah. And, I don't talk to my mom's side of the family. So they live in Oregon. Haven't seen them in over a decade. So it's, it definitely fractured parts of the family. There's really just no relationship with her side of the family. And the few times I have talked to them, they've said it's really hard for us to talk to you guys because of how painful it is, reminder of their sister, of their daughter. And then for us as well, the reminder that like this is her family and all of you guys went through the same childhood, the adverse effects of that. And it's just a lot of pain all around. So sometimes it's like easier to just not broach that.
This brings me back to our last episode on boundaries. Like that sounds like a wall. Somebody's just built a wall and said like, I'm not even going to feel anything about that. I don't want to even deal with it. And how that totally closes you off.
That seems like it could have been hard that you not only lost your mom, but you lost like her whole side of the family.
I guess I don't see it as a loss per se. Certainly there is the potential for a relationship, or there was a potential for a relationship, but my mom's side of the family, my mom obviously had mental health issues, and she was getting help for it at the time of her death. And the rest of my family on that side does have mental health issues. And sometimes it's just easier to not be a part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that sounds bad, but.
Well, we did talk about in that
healthy
boundaries episode of just there are times that you need to have some safe distance from the things that are too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And my grandfather is still alive, and he was kind of like the abusive person in the household. So I think that's probably why we try to keep our distance, just because I think there's a lot of blame on him, on me and my brother's part. And I don't think we really want to get into it at that point.
That's really hard. I know what that's like, feeling an anger towards a relative.
Mm-hmm.
And just trying to protect yourself.
Yeah.
Just kind of stay safe.
Yeah.
What meaning, going back to that thought of just the meaning in our hard times, that we can try to make sense of things that are really hard, what meaning have you been able to find in understanding suicide and trying to relate to or have compassion for others that are going through similar traumas?
Mm-hmm. I think it's made me a more understanding person. Definitely with how angry I was towards my mom, whenever the topic of suicide would come up, I would say really toxic things like that's selfish, like all that type of stuff. And so now that I've kind of tried to learn more about it from, that perspective, I think I've come to understand, it's these people are really suffering, and it's not from a selfish standpoint. It's just they're hurting. And so I think it's helped me definitely be a more understanding person.
I think that's so important, that to realize that that individual really is in so much pain and in so much suffering that they can't imagine how they would ever recover from it. They just need the pain to stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think unless you're in that position, I don't think you can really ever wrap your mind around it. I certainly can't.
There are different coping. I wondered if we could take a real pause about like coping whenever you feel these suicidal thoughts, different ways. I know one of them is reminding yourself that it's temporary is one of the ways that you can kind of get through it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Also, reaching out, we've talked about in our community episode. If you kind of realize these thoughts in your head, go tell someone as quickly as possible.
Yeah, don't isolate.
Yeah, that's going to be the gut move, but reach out.
Mm-hmm. And definitely from like a friend perspective, it's easy to like see a friend that's like down and say, oh, are you feeling okay? And, maybe they don't want to go out as much. And, after a while you're just like, oh, this person isn't fun anymore. And so you stop. Like, it's almost like a two-way isolation. The person is isolating themselves, and then after a while the friends just, maybe stop inviting them to dinner or something. So, that can definitely push them towards more isolation.
Yeah, and just getting to know ourselves on what are the things that bring comfort and soothing whenever our hearts are hurting, because there are so many things that can really overstress and overload us. That can just take us outside that window of tolerance and just feel like we're drowning. So finding the ways that what are the things that will bring me comfort and support, and that is really hard to do. It's the catch-22 of any kind of depression, that you need some sense of agency and effort to be able to get better, but you feel like you don't have any.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I did want to switch gears to more of a resiliency type topic about your supports that you had growing up outside of the family. Like, are there women that you rallied behind or learned from, or was it your group of friends that you decided to click and communicate with?
I have a very small family, no cousins, so it's just me and my brother. So growing up, love my family, but they're not really they're not really good with kids. Let's just say that. So when I would want to reach out or, kind of lean on someone, it was more like my friends' parents. I was around my friends much more than I was my family anyway, because they live so far away. So it was usually my friends' parents, like in Girl Scouts, the leaders would be that support, or even some teachers, I think, recognized that maybe I was a child that needed a little more attention. So they would give me that as well. I had a teacher, she would keep a journal with me, and only me. And like, I would take it home and write how I was feeling, and she'd reply back, and we would just do that.
Wow, that's a cool impact she had on you.
Yeah, I still have it. So.
Oh, that's so tender. Yeah. We've talked on our episodes about the importance of schools and teachers, and because I know they have so much on their plate that they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And yet how important it is to make the connections like your teacher had with you.
Yeah, definitely.
That's powerful. I love that idea. And you still have it today.
Yeah. And they sent me, one of them actually came to my house when it happened, and she brought me cards that the class had made, and, a stuffed animal she bought for me. So yeah, they were a really, really great community that we had at that time.
Yeah, we'll take a quick pause to send solidarity to the Chicago teachers in strike.
Yeah.
Mom used to teach in Illinois as well, so that's pretty cool. I definitely think that teachers take on a lot for pay that is minimal.
Yeah.
And I can even see in my own life how teachers impacted me and went way above and beyond to help me grow. And it's really because of them that I stand here today. I wanted to say growing up too, how creating these safe spaces, I feel like my family was one of the friends' parents that people would go to, that we had multiple people who would eat dinner at our house multiple times, and mom and dad have pseudo-adopted a ton of my friends. Mom is known as Mama Swag.
Nice.
But I really do believe that your friends are a closer bond. Like, who you choose to have a bond with is more lasting and more durable than just a familial
There you go.
relationship. The phrase blood is thicker than water, I don't know if you know the full phrase, but it's blood of the brother is thicker than water of the womb. So the longer phrase of that short sentence is just like, who you choose to be friends with, who you choose to have your support is thicker, stronger.
Oh, yeah.
And definitely something to validate just the importance of we are made for connection and interpersonal relationships, not to be isolated, not to be alone. And sometimes that happens outside of the context of family. And that's hard for families to face and deal with. For as much as possible, you know, we want to create that safe space at home, but sometimes we find it extending out beyond our home too.
Oh, yeah. Definitely growing up, I've always said this. My dad and brother don't believe it, but I've always said that, you know, blood doesn't mean anything. You know, if you have family members that are, you know, toxic or not really good for you, then I always have validated anyone who says my friends are my family. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wanted to take this moment to also talk about a larger scope of things about society, as I often like to do. Mm-hmm. I think the focus on a nuclear family is something that ends up hurting us, that instead, if we had a community focus that also includes your neighbors and your community, we expect everything to just be confined to the home. And even in this present day, when you have both parents working or even one parent working, it's too much for a single family to hold. And if we had a community-based view on things, that a village raises a child, not just a single person or two single people.
Yeah.
I think that we can really grow to rely on each other and kind of change a perspective as well, that it isn't, this is my territory and no one else gets into it except for me and my family, but rather this whole place is home and I've reached out to everyone here.
We all need support. We all need each other. And I find it interesting how people think independence is a good quality and really interdependence is what is healthy. And even just this week, noticing different families going through hard things that our family has gone through too, and being able to reach out and share and care for each other in the midst of that is so powerful, to know that you're not alone, that somebody else has gone through it or is going through it too. Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of speaks to how the importance of preventing suicide, preventing that desperation when we can. Mm-hmm. How do we create those safe spaces that we're always talking about?
Yeah.
And on the topic of individualism, like that's something that's really pushed in the United States right now, where it's like your grades, you achieve, and then that impacts your grades at the end of the day. Or you make your own wage, and then at the end of the day, that's your wage. I don't need to go into deep about either of those, but just to say that humans have grown to be community-based. We've grown to rely on each other. And this idea of individualism really hurts us. It's important to be an individual that's separate and your own person, but in addition to, it's also good to have a whole network of support.
Well, and also, you know, to expand on that, that's not just the U.S. I think that's very Western culture, very individual, kind of like, this is yours, this is mine. It's not really, I think definitely with that, we isolate ourselves, just trying to like push ourselves to do the best, and, you know, stresses and everything. So, yeah.
In medieval times, they had a concept called the commons, which actually was it's been around for much longer than the medieval era. That's just when this private property thing kind of came in and took over. Mm-hmm. But it's still present in places like Puerto Rico, where you have just a communal space where everyone can go to, everybody can hang out, kind of like the equivalent of a park. But there's food, like mangoes grow on the trees and stuff like that, or the well. Yeah, I just like the idea of everybody being able to take care of each other instead of having to rely on these isolationist type approaches. And I think even your story really plays into that. Yeah.
The need for community, the need for connection, that it's okay to need each other, it's okay to have needs. That's all kind of some radical change of
it's okay to ask for help.
Exactly.
It's okay to not be perfect. We're
Right.
not perfect.
Right. I was curious, Montana, you had shared with us earlier about your degree in college, where you went with that. And I'm wondering how that came about.
Yeah. I actually took, like I was saying earlier, I was a communications major at Ohio State, and I just decided to take one semester where I would just look through the whole class catalog and see which sounded interesting and wouldn't go towards any like gen eds or anything like that. And so I took a semester where I just took classes that I thought sounded really cool. And one of the classes was, it was actually called Sexuality and Violence. And it was talking about kind of like the power dynamic between men and women and how violence might play into that. And I just felt like I was learning a lot of things, and also learning how to support survivors of any type of trauma. And I really enjoyed that, and I ended up just completely switching my major and my minor. Had to take a 5th year, but that's okay. And I became a women's studies major and a sociology minor. So, yeah.
Was there anyone in particular that was an impact for you taking that direction?
No one directly impacted me. I think it was just my own curiosity that made me, even take that semester to just explore my interests. But I will say my aunt, I call her my hippie aunt. She lives in Ann Arbor. She's very outgoing, goes to all the protests that you can think of. And she really, really liked that. And I actually ended up getting the feminism symbol tattooed onto my ankle. So she
That's
was
awesome.
She digged it. Yeah. So she really liked that.
I did want to clarify for our listeners as well who haven't maybe been directly impacted by the activist movement or even women's movements year after year, but rather feminism to a lot of people is this idea of women dominance. But something that I want to clarify as well is that feminism is gender equality and just treating people with respect. And we kind of have a masculine focused society. And it's one that hurts our mental health as well. It's all connected.
Yeah.
But just to say that feminism is about caring about both genders, that the man shouldn't be the center of the household who makes all the decisions and whatever he says goes, but rather that everybody is a person in that household and they all deserve an equal voice and personhood. Yeah.
And also to, put it towards mental health, the man shouldn't have to always be strong. He can, get counseling, he can ask for help. It's, empowering men as well to, be able to say, I'm not okay and I need help, and, for others to take notice and help. Yeah.
That is so impactful too. And we've talked about this on a couple episodes with Charles Roberts and with Jason Wellman, how they both talked about how they needed that support as men, because to even cry is something that is frowned upon or seen as weak or something that men don't do. And so to even have that vulnerability is healthy because it's one of our emotions.
Yeah.
Is to feel sadness. It's okay. And so, yes, I would definitely say I'm a feminist and a strong feminist because it's an ideology that tries to listen to everyone, including men, because this ultra masculinity hurts men.
Yeah.
And women.
It hurts everyone.
And it's been hurting us for like thousands of years. So imagine that trauma from generation to generation.
Yeah.
I could go on all day.
I could too.
Yeah, is there anything else you want to mention?
In trying to educate myself about this topic and people having suicidal thoughts and intent, I did, and, you know, kind of tying in the feminism thing, when I was with the suicide prevention organization on campus, we did talk about how men typically complete suicide more than women. You know, the numbers are vastly skewed towards, you know, men ending up taking their lives and women, you know, surviving attempts should that happen. And so I think that it's good that we are also bringing in men into the discussion and trying to say, like, you know, it's okay to reach out for help. It's okay to get counseling. You know, if you need to, get on medication and reach out for help. And, like, it's okay to not be okay. So
Definitely.
yeah.
I think some of our recent episodes have been really foundational. We had our first 3 episodes were a handbook for crisis and mental health. And when we explained the meaning of our name of Community Roots, we went back to the roots of Community Roots, has great support for people that are overwhelmed and needing to know how to feel more stable. But then also just recently, we've had episodes on feelings and emotions and boundaries. And as we head into the holidays, I think we're going to head into some topics of coping skills and things, because being around family and holidays are heavy times. We have more darkness outside. We lose sunlight. Yeah. Sometimes you get into some rough weather depending on what area of the country you're listening in. So those are all things that can help be a support to people. We really want to reach out and help the hurting.
I wanted to take this opportunity to say that if you are having any suicidal thoughts, or if you're contemplating suicide or a friend is, you can call 1-800-273-8255 or text HOME to 741-741. But we've mentioned this before. Reach out to your supports, reach out to your community, because that is going to be the best way for you to get support, is talk to somebody you know. These resources are there as well to put you on a good footing and making sure that you're okay and that you can get help.
And we understand how hard that is to reach out and to build those safe networks. So many people just say, I don't have anyone. And so we've shared on our episodes about taking walks, getting outside, just finding people that you can greet and try to develop that. Where can I find connection so that I don't have to be isolated and alone?
You know, and also on the other side, if you're a friend and you notice that someone that you love or care about is, you know, maybe acting a little different or feeling a little down or isolating themselves, most people, I don't know anyone that would be upset if you just asked if they were okay. So if you're a friend, you can reach out as well and say, you know, are you okay? I've noticed you're acting different. So reach out for sure.
Absolutely.
I felt, at least in our culture, to say like, hey, are you doing okay? They'll be like, yeah, I'm doing fine. You got to follow up with a second, like, no, are you really doing okay? Because this is a safe place.
Yeah.
Then so people can open up.
Absolutely.
So we're reaching the end of our episode. If you have any thoughts about this, if you have any stories connected to this, any questions, or a place you'd like us to go in the future, email us at communityroots.pod@gmail.com. We'd love to interact with our listeners and hear what you guys are saying. Any stories you have, any ideas you have, please reach out to us.
And don't forget to look us up on Facebook. We have a lot of different mental health encouragement and things that remind us of the topics that we've been sharing. And we'd love for you to join that community on Facebook. And we are also on Instagram. Look us up.
Yeah, and don't forget to rate us on iTunes. If you go to our Facebook, if you email us on Gmail, or if you just search us on iTunes, we'll give you the link so that you'll be good to go. We like to end every episode by thanking people. I want to shout out my whole family, Emma, Noah, Maddie, Todd /Dad, and my 2 dogs, because they've been supportive too. 3 dogs. And my mom, of course, who's with me. But just to shout out, because through these episodes, I really do appreciate the closeness of our family and the health of our family, that we're able to talk stuff out. And I know we're always in progress and process. I'm excited to where we're going, and I'm really proud of where we've been too.
I'm thankful for new beginnings and new seasons, and so grateful for support. A shout out to Samuel for working on my website for me, and Alexander Wells came through for a logo for me as well, like we had for Community Roots. He's also helped with my private practice. And just the different mentors and friends that are supporting me through a lot of transition and change. I am so grateful.
I just want to thank you guys for hosting, for having me on the show. And definitely just reflecting on everything. I just want to thank my family. We've been through a lot, and we're still very close. We're still very open with each other. And I know and recognize that a lot of people don't have that. So definitely makes me appreciate what I have. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Montana.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for being here. Okay, we will see you next week for our regular Community Roots. We'll see you then.